If you don't want to bring your chess into the next level, if you prefer to be stuck wherever you are right now on your chess journey, just click off this video immediately, it's not for you. Instead, go watch one of the custom chess videos. I'm gonna show you what separates a strong chess player from a weak one using real-life examples and tell you what kind of a mindset you have to be able to play chess like a pro. What's up, chess player? In this position I have black pieces, and so far I have played pretty much perfectly. I have developed all of my pieces, I have doubled my rooks along the d files, all of my pieces are active. I'm playing against a 2600 rated guy whose account is already blocked for violating the fair play policy. I have no idea why is that. Anyway, the question is, how do you continue here for black? Like, yes, we all know those golden principles, you need to make sure all of your pieces are active, but how do you continue afterwards? Because the opponent also did the same thing, his pieces are active, so I kind of feel like I have the upper hand here. The question is how to use it. So feel free to pause the video for a second and we are going to discuss, because it's very important for you to understand how really strong chess players are handling such a situation, how to come up with the right plan in chess. I hope you have found it. So I was thinking so much in terms of how I can use the weakness of this e4 square, the fact that this knight went back to d2, and I thought really for a long time, even though it's a blitz game and I only have 1 minute and 40 seconds left, I have thought for 40 seconds and played rook takes d2, which you see is a blunder here. So the key takeaway here, not necessarily if it seems like you can do something and you see some motive like the weakness of this e4 pawn together with this queen being kind of vulnerable, because once I get there I'm gonna attack it and this guy on d2, whatever this guy is going to be, not necessarily you need to go for that and sacrifice if everything is fine in your position. So let me show you why it's the wrong move. Well, he can just take it back with the rook, and then I take it, and then that was my idea, that I attack here, I take on a4. The problem is if he goes somewhere with the queen, notice it's a double attack. I attack the queen and the bishop, and the only square you can choose to secure your bishop with the queen is e3. But it doesn't work because of bishop g5, and then I'm winning pretty much everything. The problem is he can just take on a4 first, and then play queen to d3, and then he's protecting everything, takes, and bishop b4 doesn't work because he simply has the move c3. Otherwise, I'm just an exchange down, I have a pawn for it, but it's not enough to compensate, and white is much better. Instead, the right move is to play knight to a6. We need to remaneuver our pieces here. So we know that not necessarily we need to go all in for it. I mean, I thought for such a long time about it, and then I thought, well, if I already have spent that time, I couldn't really calculate it till the end. It felt pretty complicated, it felt like I might have some chances there, and so I have just taken a risk and went for it. And now it really worked out for me in the end of the day. I won that game because after rook takes d2, instead of making the right move, my opponent played bishop takes d2, which is a huge mistake. Now the whole variation works, as after knight takes e4, queen e3 and bishop g5, I'm just winning that piece on d2 and basically the game. It doesn't change the fact though that the objective evaluation of rook takes d2 move is a very bad one. It's a blunder, so I should have played that knight to a6 move. And I have thought about it for some time, but I thought it's a move back and I never want to make a move back. I never recommend you do it, but it turns out sometimes you should, because you need to remaneuver your pieces. So what black is threatening here is just to play bishop to b4 and being those horrible knights with that rook on e1. This knight on c3 is vulnerable, and then the knight can even come back to c5 to put additional pressure on that pawn on e4. Another idea might be to play knight to b4 and then attack that pawn on c2, which is very vulnerable. You can't protect it with the rook because I'm gonna just take on d2. I'm gonna get 2 pieces for a rook, and that is a huge advantage. And you cannot also defend it with the bishop because I'm gonna just take it with the knight and win a free pawn, and those pawns are gonna collapse. That doesn't work. So basically white should take it here. That would spoil black's pawn structure, but double pawns are not that horrible as you might think and as your coach might have told you. I mean, as long as your pieces are active in the middle game, it's not really about the pawns, it's about how active your pieces are. Sometimes the pawn structure makes a huge role, I'm not gonna deny that, but here you can see that black's pawn structure is just horrible. I have here the isolated pawn, I have here the double isolated pawns, but the position is actually equal, and black is having a bishop's pair, and that bishop e4 move is still coming, and there is still pressure along this d-file, so it's not that simple for white. That is the first key point that I wanted to show you from my speed run on chess.com. I went from 2514, as you can see here, up to 2550, and I want to walk you through commenting on the key moments because those games were very instructive, and that is the day number 8 of my Journey to Grandmaster challenge. And so I played those games. That was the first round. Like I said, my opponent was banned later on. I'm not sure whether he played this exact game fairly or not, but I won it, so I am fine with that. Next, I played a match of 3 games against a Grandmaster from Switzerland. He is a pretty strong guy. And here we have got a very interesting position in the first games. Here you can see that white is a little bit more active, getting a lot of space on both sides of the board, but once again the pawn structure is far from being ideal, and well, I might have some weaknesses, but my opponent played e5, which is not that solid. You see the right move was e6. The question for you is how to continue as white. Very important to understand this difference because once again I failed to make the right move. So I played here the move b4, and that is a miss because it allows black to have a huge counterplay, and that is exactly what happened in the game. Instead, I could have played here queen to a6, attacking the pawn on c6 first. My opponent absolutely must defend it, and then I do the same thing. I play b4. Of course, I don't want to allow my opponent just to take this pawn back like that and develop his new piece. But I want to make sure that that a5 move is not possible. And then it's very difficult for my opponent to put pressure on my pawn structure. And then I can just continue normally with my developments, develop the knight, protect that pawn, maybe even with a3, and then place that bishop on b2. And then I'm good to go. But instead, what happened in the game, I played b4 immediately, and then my opponent started to put pressure on me. I played c3, and then he's going from another side, and I've got into big trouble. By this point of the game, it's -3 for me, even though it felt for me still that I'm very active. It seems like I have a bunch of extra pawns, but the engine says, you're just very stupid, the initiative is so huge that black is completely winning. But my opponent did here play rook to h4. Even though he's a grandmaster, he still has a lot of time. He blundered the rook just like that. And I assume the reason behind that blunder is that he wanted to play the move knight to d7, but then he blundered the move rook h8. Well, another explanation can be that he just wanted to play rook h5 and misclicked with rook to takes h4. That is actually pretty reasonable. Anyway, afterwards I've got a very good position, just an extra rook, and thank God converted this position into a full point, but that was just the beginning of our match. In the next game, I played the fielder defense against him because that is one of my favorite openings, and we reached this position after one of the main lines of the fielder defense, and the question is, how do you continue as black? Well, you see that your knight is hanging here, you see that this bishop is very active along this diagonal, you see that you haven't finished your development yet. So what do you do? What kind of a plan you should apply here? Feel free to pause the video for a second and try to find the best solution here. I mean, in the right moment, maybe not immediately because of bishop takes c4 and then the knight is hanging, but that would be definitely on my agenda. Now, the problem is after bishop takes c3, instead of taking it back, my opponent took on b6. And then I thought, I'm also fine, I'm just taking on e1, and then I'm getting a pair of bishops. I also have a bishop to e6 move that is finishing my development, and at the same time creating a huge threat for this knight, so he has no time to grab my bishop. But it turns out he just played that, and then after bishop d2, this position is just much better for white. And then we reached this one after bishop to c7, and I thought, I have a bishop against the knight, we have pawns on the both sides of the board, so everything should be great. But in fact, it's plus 1.5 for white, a huge advantage. And this knight to d7 move is the wrong one. Please feel free to find the right move for white. Let me flip the board for you, because it's a very instructive moment in terms of how you get advantage. Okay, let's see what was the right thing here. So there are basically two moves. If you want to play rook takes d8, that's completely fine. This position is actually better thanks to knight to d7. And now the problem is the pawn is hanging. And if you play c4, then you just play knight c4, and then that's basically Yeah, not possible to save that pawn. One of the pawns is going to fall, and if you play bishop to e7, which is a very normal move just to defend that pawn, now suddenly your king is not getting away of this g8 square, and this king is just moving to c4, and the position is horrible for black. Even better was, and that is an amazing move here, not rook to d8, but rook to d7, because it turns out the bishop on c7 is even worse than it would be on d8. And the problem with bishop takes b6, which seems like a cool move, you're just winning a knight for free, and your rook is still protected. But there is rook takes b7, then suddenly this bishop has absolutely no squares to go, and because of the weakness of the back rank, you still cannot play rook d2 and try to grab the pawn. So that is incredible. I mean, imagine making this move rook to d7 on the board. Anyway, my opponent went for knight d7, and after b6 and e5, he plundered that pawn because now I play c4 and the rook is hanging. The rook has to go somewhere along the d file because otherwise the knight is going to be hanging. But that is why e5 is a blunder, because now I use that pin and win the pawn on e5, and later on the game it's just now completely winning. My bishop is so strong. But it was so useful for me to learn that not always bishop is stronger than the knight, because this pawn structure, imagine just taken here. First of all, there is a tactical thing here with this c4, c5 pawn, but even if white plays knight to c4, the computer claims it's still better for white here, and that is a completely surprise for me, because I thought with the move b5 at the right point, I mean, that is such a huge position. I can just centralize, I can put my bishop on c7 so that I control that knight before I play the move b5. What can be better than that? The bishop is always stronger than the knight when there are pawns on both sides of the board. But it's just not true. That's how complicated chess is. So here, my pawn structure is much worse because I have 4 pawns against 3 on this part of the board, but my pawns are doubled here, and that is what makes the difference. And here you have 4 against 3 without any problems for white. Perfect pawn structure for the white side. Also, the pieces are very active, the skin is coming to the center, absolutely no weaknesses. So back to the skip position, I hope you are still wondering what was the right move, whether you have chosen the right move. It's knight takes e4. Just going for this position with bishop e5 and having a pair of bishops, absolutely no problems. I have no idea why I didn't play it. In the blitz game, you normally tend to make those attacking moves, more tactical ideas, because, well, you take, he takes back, you win a pawn, everything is perfect. But chess is much more complicated, and it's not checkers where you're obliged to take back if your opponent takes. But this position is a fantastic one for black, even though you can play rook to d1 as white and seemingly control this entire file step by step. Black is getting away from it. They play rook to b8, preparing the move b5. You try to double the rooks along the d file, but there is absolutely no penetration squares, and that is the power of 2 bishops. They're controlling absolutely everything. You can even play g5 here according to the engine. You can just improve your position step by step, finally make use of this bishop, and then you're gonna convert this advantage probably into a full point because it's huge. So please remember, if you want to play tactically, you need to make sure that it works for you in the end of the day. And if you have a very good positional alternative, when you just get a pair of bishops pretty much with no compensation, you should go for it if you have a perspective for your bishops, if you have a way to make both of them active. But here, this bishop on e5 is just a perfect piece that has absolutely no opponent, because this guy cannot do anything against it, and the knight is just placing just very passively on c3 in general in the Philidor defense. Because of the c6 pawn, it cannot go forward, and you see it's only a weakness for white. Later on in this exact game, we reached this incredibly complicated rook endgame. My opponent plays rook to e6. Notice that the amount of pawns is equal now, but earlier I had an extra pawn. I always was more active, and I of course wanted to win that game. But notice that I have only 20 seconds against 56 seconds of my opponent. I have really poor time balance in this game. So my opponent attacks the pawn. I pretty much don't have any way to defend it, so I'm playing f5. He's playing rook to f6. He is just spinning the pawn. I play king to e4, all the best moves. He takes it here, I take it, and now he exchanges the rooks, thinking that the pawn game is completely winning for him, but in fact, it's completely winning for black here. The reason behind that is seemingly white plays king to b4, ready to just crush all of the pawns, and I'm too slow with all of those ideas to take that pawn and promote my pawn because I just have no time for that. But it turns out you cannot take on b5. So here I want to make another exercise for you, very useful in this pawn game, trying to understand there is only one move that is completely winning for black. Try to find it. I hope you have found it, because I didn't. I played here king to f4. Afterwards, the position is completely winning. It's like +7 for white. But if you play the right move, king to e4, it's +6 for black. The reason behind that is that in chess, the geometry laws, you know, from the elementary school, they just don't apply here. It doesn't matter if you go this way with the king or you go this way, you need the exact amount of moves. But chances are, if you go this way, then maybe the king is still useful on this part of the board. So you kind of make a multi-purpose move, and that is always your goal in chess. So let's see the difference. Now, first of all, you cannot take on b5, because now I play c3. You cannot stop all of those pawns. If you take, I just play a3, and then this pawn promotes much faster before your pawn can reach the c8 square. If you play b3, the same thing applies, and if you take on a4, I just take on b2, and once again promote my queen. So you cannot take that. But what can be played and what has been played in the game, he played the move c3. He did it once I played king to f4. Here, this move is not working, because now I have the move king to d3, which I didn't have earlier. My king is on f4 and cannot reach, so that is the multi-purpose advantage of the move king to e4 comparing to the move king to f4. And this seems like a subtle difference, because anyway we want to go to f3 and grab that pawn. That makes a difference between losing a game and winning the game. That makes a difference between a weak player and a strong player. In this case, I was a weak player. Yes, of course, I have 15 seconds, but still, it's not an excuse. I should feel that momentum. I should feel that it makes much more sense to go to the center of the board for the key. So now, if you take that pawn on b5 in the game, my opponent just could grab this pawn and proceed with winning the game. But here, I have this move a3 once again, just breaking through, because takes, and now my pawn is faster. He plays a4, I just step back, and then it turns out in the end of the day, yes, we promote both the queens, but I do have this check, queen to c4, then the king goes to b6, still pretty complicated, but my task is just to exchange the queens. Once I do that, I'm just completely winning. Even though I'm one pawn down, the activity of the king is everything. In the endgame, the more active your king, the more chances you have. This king is absolutely misplaced. It has to make 27 moves to reach the desired square, whereas I'm just grabbing both of the pawns, and there is absolutely no way for white to exchange it. In the game, however, after my move king to f4, my opponent just played c3, just making sure that I don't have that pawn breakthrough, and then exactly the same thing happened, but from the other side. We both promoted our queens, but then after check, he just exchanged my queen, and then the endgame is absolutely losing for me due to this pawn on b2. The next game was decisive. Who is going to win our mini-match between me and this Grandmaster from Switzerland? He played here knight to c4, and seemingly he has a very good knight against the bishop, but I have an extra pawn here, and even though all of my pawns are on the dark squares and my bishop is on the dark squares, that's normally what you should avoid, but here he has so many weaknesses, and here it's the case where even the best knight is still worse than the worst bishop, because, well, I have so many checks, all of my pieces are active, he has weaknesses, and this knight has absolutely no way to be defended, because here after king to d3, what do you do with your knight? He just played knight a3, but then I wanted just to promote my pawn, there is absolutely no way to stop it, and that's exactly what happened in this rook's endgame. Those pawns are going forward, and finally c7, the game is over. In the next game, I have got this position against a player from Greece. He played here knight takes d5, and that is what so many low-rated players are doing. That is exactly the mistake they are making. They see the pawn is hanging, so I'm gonna take it. If they're a little bit smarter, they start to calculate the number of attackers and the number of defenders here. They see that they have 2 attackers, I only have 1 defender, so they just go for it. But the mistake they are making, a horrible, horrible mistake that I hope you never do, never make a move without thinking what your opponent can do afterwards. Because you absolutely must take a look at his opportunities. You never play chess alone, and your opponent always has his dreams, his ideas, his threats, his hopes, and you absolutely need to pay attention to that. How to do that? Well, first of all, you are starting with the most active opportunities, which are checks, captures, and threats. And the only check I have in this position is knight to e7, but that's good enough because it's making use of this entire diagonal here, and it turns out white is just winning an exchange. There is absolutely no way to stop it because it's a double attack. I not only give a check, I attack this knight on d5. And after takes, I just take it on a8, I win an exchange, and then I proceed with queen to a5, because once you get extra material, you want to exchange as many pieces as possible. That helps you to convert your advantage. If you have like 10 pieces against 9, yes, it's an advantage, but it's kind of a small one. It's difficult to notice it. But if you have just one piece against 0, well, you're just crushing your opponent. There is absolutely nothing he can do about it. So exchanging, especially the queens, helps you a lot because your opponent cannot do anything afterwards. So I proceed to win this game. And next, I have played against one of the strongest women in the chess world, Alina Danielian. She's actually a men's grandmaster. And the question is, how do you use black's advantage here? How do you play as black? Feel free to pause the video for a second to learn incredibly useful thing and principle here. Great, I'm pretty sure you have found one of the right moves because there are a bunch of the good moves here. I have made the best one, which is c5, because you feel that you are ahead in terms of the development. You have developed all of your pieces and they're active. You also feel that this king is still there in the center, not really in safety. And the first world chess champion once said, if you have the initiative, you must use it. And that is the golden principle you always need to follow, because you should just have this feeling. Okay, all of my pieces are there ready for the battle. Instead, my opponent is just not ready for it at all. He still needs a few tempi. But if I am not careful enough, if I'm not going to use it right now, then he's going to be able to stabilize the situation, and then my initiative is gone. So right now, I need to go for it, and I played c5, takes. Now I'm opening up the center, and well, feel free to find the best move here, because that is just destroying here white. Knight goes to d3. That's absolutely not the only move, but a good enough one, because I'm attacking the king with a check, and I'm attacking the bishop. There is absolutely no way to save it. So takes, and then I'm taking on f3 because I want to open up the king. I want to attack it. And after takes, I have bishop h3. The king has absolutely no way to hide, and then I'm winning an exchange. The question is, how do you win the game from here? Well, you cannot give a checkmate with just the queen, so you always need to connect as many pieces for your attack. That is the golden principle, and that is exactly what I did here. I played the move knight to h5. Not only I'm connecting a new piece, the knight, I'm also opening up the bishop. That is gonna play a huge role in this game. So after knight to f1, I played knight to f4, and that is such a multi-purpose move. That is a type of moves I always recommend you try to do in all of your games, because not only this knight is attacking the queen and the bishop, it also prepares the move queen to g2 because it covers that square. I mean, that is a fantastic knight there. After queen to e3, I played queen to g2, king goes back, and now I connect yet another piece to the attack. I played bishop takes c3, and even though the pawn is protected by the queen, you cannot take it because of checkmate in 1, and so my opponent resigned here. So I was very near to my goal of reaching 2550, and in this game, I mean, that was fantastic. I have reached such a huge position as white. Feel free to find the best move, because yeah, that is the key moment of the game here. The right move, absolutely the best one, is to play d5. You see that these rooks are there in the center. Once again, we have the initiative. We must take use of it because it's blocking this bishop. Now this pawn is attacked 3 times, even though the knight is pinned, but still 2 attackers is more than enough to just grab this pawn next move. There is absolutely nothing black can do about it. And it's a move forward, it's an active move. Instead, what I did is queen to b1 and move back. Like, never go back if you have an opportunity to go forward. I just wanted to get rid of this spin because of the knight, and in the same time still attack this pawn on e4, but unfortunately, next move I didn't even took the pawn on e4. Instead, I played the move d5 just to block the diagonal. It seemed for me dangerous that if I take, and then g2 might be in trouble, but now black just plays f5, and suddenly the tables are turned, and I have no initiative anymore. The position is equal. So that is how important it is to use the momentum when you have the initiative. Please always do it in your games. I ended up having this perpetual check in the end of the day, but because I have absolutely 0 time, I lost this game. I was still determined to reach my goal, so in this game I made a brilliant move. Feel free to pause the video for a second and find it, black to move. The right move is rook takes b6. I mean, that is incredible. It's a brilliant move. It was a big surprise for me, because it felt so logical. Like my rook on a6, it's doing absolutely nothing otherwise. And my opponent is really attacking here on the king side. So even though I'm an exchange up here, if I do nothing, step by step, my opponent is gonna go forward and this attack is gonna become dangerous and I'm gonna be checkmated. So you cannot just stay there and, well, be happy about the fact that you have an extra exchange. No, you should use it. And one of the ways you can use it is to give it up back to reach some different type of advantage. So I took it on b6. I also win a pawn on c5 in the process, and that pawn is very important because that enables me to go forward with c5 to make this breakthrough. Also, that knight on b6 was controlling that a4 square, making it very difficult for me to make my counterplay. You always need to have some counterplay in chess. You can't just sit there and watch your opponent coming, attacking you, and getting the better of you. Always need some counterplay. And so we all know that the rook is stronger than the knight, but it's not just about that common knowledge. It's about what really pieces are doing on the actual board and the actual game. If the knight is more active than the rook in this concrete position, and you have a way to exchange your rook for a knight and a very important pawn that is blocking entire attack here on the queen side, then you should go for it. That's the main key takeaway from here. Later on, I reached another rook's endgame, and here I made the move rook f6, because once again, if you have extra material, you need to exchange your pieces. The more pieces you exchange, the simpler it is. In the best case scenario, you reach the pawn endgame, which is completely winning for you, because thanks to an extra pawn, you have much more time to grab the pawn and then promote your pawn, and you're winning. This final game to reach 25-50, to reach my goal, I was white, and the best move just completely blows my mind. Try to find that it's white to move here. So I played here the move knight to e5, and that is a blunder. I mean, that is incredible. The reason behind that is that I broke the golden principle here. I wasn't thinking, I wasn't paying enough attention to my opponent's counterplay. And it turns out he can play here knight to a4, just breaking the connection between the queen and the rook, and then the rook is going to be lost. I'm going to be an exchange down, and that is a completely different story, although I still have some compensation. That's not winning for me. Instead, the right move is just to play rook a2, as incredible as it might feel, and then after rook a8, you just exchange everything and you reach a much better endgame. For me, I just couldn't believe that such a move, knight e5, can be bad, because if you take, then I take with the pawn and then I open up the bishop. That is fantastic for me. If you don't, then I have a beautiful knight here attacking everything, so I was always happy with it. But unfortunately, as I said, I just blundered the move knight a4. My opponent played rook to a8, fortunately for me, and then we reached that endgame, and I had a fantastic plan here with white, just going for this h7 pawn. And that is exactly what I'm doing, and there is absolutely nothing that black can do. And that is how you win in the endgame. You find weaknesses in your opponent's camp. So h7 is such a weakness, and that is what I do. Then you find strengths in your position. In my case, that's a pair of bishops. But to get a real benefit of having a pair of bishops, you need to open up the position as much as possible. So how do you achieve that? Well, you exchange some pawns so that the diagonals are open for your bishops. So I'm playing f5, I'm attacking a bunch of pawns, and after all of the exchanges, I'm winning that h7 pawn, and most importantly, all of my bishops are incredibly active and strong now. And that knight on a8 is still doing absolutely nothing. That is giving me the winning advantage. I just take, and then I was very careful here not to allow my opponent to get any chance to counterplay, because you see, he is a very strong guy, and I really wanted to achieve my goal. So I wanted to pay full attention till the very end, because it's never too late to spoil your game. Please remember that. But I feel like you know that without my help. So finally, somehow my opponent blundered a bishop, and I won this game here, and I reached 25-50. But there is one huge achievement that I really want to share with you. I'm trying to solve tactics every day because it's a way to train your brain to just keep in mind that it's very important. 99% of chess is tactics, is calculation. So here I achieved my best result of all time. I mean, that was incredible for me. 53. Up to now, I only achieved 51 highest result in my entire life. So I was so happy to get it. It means that I'm really improving in terms of my tactics, in terms of my calculation. And here is the final tactic I needed to solve to achieve that score, so feel free to find it yourself. It's white to move. The main problem is I only had a few seconds here, and of course, under such a time pressure, under this pressure of trying to achieve the goal, it's much more difficult to find the move. But if you really think about it, it's not that difficult. Your bishop is under attack, you can just take it on f6, and then you have the move e6, you take it, and either you win on d7 or you play on e7 and win the bishop anyway. Now, you could have noticed that I haven't had any opening problems throughout the entire speedrun. The reason behind that is that I have a very solid opening repertoire, and I have made an entire course so that you can do it too. Just build an entire holistic opening repertoire in just 10 days. Absolutely everything you need to know to play as white and as black. It's a lifetime repertoire that you can use to play at all of the levels. I'm an international master and I use it myself to play against very strong grandmasters. I had incredible positions with Fabiano Caruana, with Hikaru Nakamura using this exact opening repertoire, and you can use it just in 10 days for a price of just one opening course. And the best thing is, if you don't like the course for any possible reason, which I can't even imagine, you can always get your money back thanks to our 7-day 100% money back guarantee, no questions asked. On top of that, there is a huge discount right now, so feel free to use the link in the description and just take a look at the free tutorials yourself and make sure to take advantage of that limited time sale to finally boost your chess. Because imagine how cool it would be to play chess without having any opening headache ever again. Now, if you still need more information to understand whether the course is the right thing for you or not, in this video I have prepared for you a completely free tutorial showing you how you play the Philidor defense, the opening we cover in the course in so many details. I play it against opponents from 500 to 2000 to show you this opening works on each level.